Show on 1080 The Fan.
Well, that felt pretty good, fellas. Welcome into the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show. Ryan Buckley, Will Ortner, and Jordan Schultz here with you. We'll talk with Anthony Newman, Andy Dirt Johnson, and possibly one Dusty Hera as well. But fellas, the number 9 Ducks march into Corvallis, and they put a whooping on the Beavers, 49-14 the final. The offense was humming. I think a lot of questions were answered today about a lot of the concerns we'd had over the last 2 weeks. But, Will, as we get things started here, just initial reactions from such a big win in what seemed like a game with pretty big stakes.
Wait. Sorry, should I turn that off? I heard that all day. F you, Beavers fans. Sorry, Will, continue.
No, it's fine. You finally got your O-line right. And I know that Matthew Bedford is still working his way back. I know that he took some snaps with the 2 in the work through, but the move in about the end of the second quarter, beginning of the third quarter last week of Poncho moving over to center and putting Strother at right guard has made a big difference. You can tell Dylan Gabriel felt comfortable in the pocket, but the most important thing that happened in this game was that you got the ground game established early. You averaged 7.5 yards per carry. Jordan James was gashing this Oregon State defense, and you moved up and down the field, and then that allowed you to be on time, so Dylan Gabriel didn't have to make a big 3rd and long throw. He's making a 3rd and manageable throw, and wide receivers caught the ball. It just looked like finally the offense has figured it out, and it was all because you made that move to put Poncho at center.
Schultz, what was so cathartic about this game for you?
I mean, it looked like it was supposed to.
Yeah.
It was nice from start to finish to feel like for the first time all season, Oregon was actually in control. It's what's going to need to happen when they get into Big Ten play. And this was. I'm not trying to knock Oregon State here. Like, they are a good team, and their running attack is something, you got to prep for. And after the Gianti performance last week, I think a lot of people wondered if OSU was going to run all over them again and just see the Ducks defense kind of falter in that regard for 2 weeks in a row, but they didn't. So nice to see the Ducks strong against the run, against such a strong running team, and for the game to look like it should.
Yeah, we'll have some time to nitpick later, but I think that, Will talks about this a lot, and Schultz, you referenced it too, but it looked the way it was supposed to look today. It finally felt like a game where, to a man, you looked physically dominant. You got to kind of play some of that bully ball. It felt like you were leaning on them for giant pickups on 1st and 2nd down. Jerry referenced a stat during the broadcast that made me snap my head and think twice. They only had 6 3rd down attempts all day on offense because they were so efficient on 1st and 2nd down. I mean, the Beavers had 15. So like the fact that you put up 49 points, 546 yards, and you only saw 3rd down 6 times. You're doing everything you want to do on offense, and you look at the box score and the way that the ball was distributed. You had contributions from your running backs, from your quarterback with both his legs and his arm, from multiple receivers, from a tight end, really the entire offense. And you mentioned it. We'll get into it in its own segment later. The O-line totally bounced back, but the skill position players, when the O-line plays like that, it's just an embarrassment of riches.
Well, it makes it easy for everyone because what we saw a lot of Jordan James early on, right? It's like, why does he keep getting tackled by his shoelaces?
Yeah.
Well, the offensive line was actually getting to linebackers, and those linebackers were the ones that were tripping Jordan James up. Well, now Jordan James has a full head of steam running out of safety, and he's going to win that matchup every time, and he's going to fall forward. And then offensively, Dylan Gabriel, for the first time in 3 weeks, he looked comfortable. The other thing that we have to remember about Dylan Gabriel, because I was harping on him last week for not looking to the right side of the field. It felt like his eyes got glued onto the left side, and he didn't go through all of his progressions. He is a lefty, remember, so it's easier for him to look left as opposed to right compared to normal quarterbacks. But it felt like he's getting more and more comfortable in the offense as a whole. He wasn't afraid to go through all of his progressions, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd read, and making sure that he was delivering a ball on time and on target. It felt like in the first 2 weeks, it's almost 1 read, 2 read, get the ball out of my hand. One, because he was afraid of getting sacked and getting hit, but also because he didn't want to mess up and make a big mistake.
Yeah, see an open option, take an open option.
Right. It felt like he finally trusted himself to make the correct play. And really, we forget about having to go through this because you had Bo Nix, who had been at Oregon the year before, so he really didn't have to go through all that learning curve that Dylan Gabriel has to go to.
Sure. Well, let let me backtrack here. Dylan Gabriel has been sensational so far this season. And you think about a couple of the passes that he hasn't connected on that could have been touchdowns as well, especially against Boise. But I shared this with you before we got on the air, and I had to run the numbers myself. But Dylan Gabriel went 20 of 24 today, and his season completion percentage went down by 0.3 percentage points. He was 84.3% going in, and after an 80% day, he goes down to 84.0.
Didn't his first incompletion come like in the third quarter?
Something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the other stat that really stood out to me, again, emblematic of something we'll dive way deeper into later, is the O-line was not allowing any hurries, any pressures, and they weren't getting penalized for anything. They played a super clean game, and I think that could be said across the board. The whole team only had 3 penalties. One of them, as Dusty referenced, probably shouldn't have been when you had a helmet hitting the quarterback's elbow and not a roughing.
Yeah, it wasn't a roughing the passer call. I understand.
Really, you're down to 2 penalties if you take that one away.
Right, and I understand why they called that penalty. What I don't understand is it was called a roughing the passer penalty, and Jeff Schwartz was going off on this on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it, but he was called for a roughing the passer because of the targeting. You go through the review and you realize, hey, that isn't targeting, so shouldn't the roughing the passer penalty go away? That'll be something that'll always be very confusing to me. But I felt like the defense played a sound game. Obviously, Oregon State ran the ball well at the beginning. I felt like Oregon State's offensive linemen were able to get to the linebackers of Oregon, and they were able to do that because they were moving the D-line early in double teams. This was the first game where I didn't really feel like Derek Harmon was just a wrecking ball the entire time. It almost felt like it took him and Birch and Tuioti a little bit to get going. And that's why you saw Bryce Betcher making a lot of tackles early.
Yeah, he was everywhere.
And it's because he was able to either get off blocks or he was the free man while they were eating up double teams. The problem with the linebacker making the tackle is linebackers make tackles. D-linemen make tackles for a loss. So once you got the D-line finally getting off those blocks and getting after the Oregon State running game, and once you got Oregon State off of timing, once Oregon State wasn't, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 3, once Oregon State had to really put the ball back in McCoy's hands, that's when you saw this defense really start to feast, and the lead in this game just widen and widen and widen.
Well, I want to put a pin in that because I want to talk more defense on the other side of this break. We'll bring in our resident defensive back, a man who's undefeated 4-0 in the Civil War as a player. That'll be Anthony Newman in just about 5 minutes or so. Before we do that, we need to get to our Ducks Game Day secret score.
Ducks Game Day secret score.
The Ducks Game Day secret score is 546. That's 546 as in the Ducks total yards today. Remember that secret score and listen to the 7 a.m. Monday hour of Dirt and Sprague and listen for the cue to text in. If you are the text that is chosen with that secret score number, you could win a $100 gift card to Laurelhurst Market, more than just your friendly neighborhood steakhouse. Make your reservation today at laurelhurstmarket.com. Anthony Newman is coming up next, but first we toss it over to Schulte, who has the Ducks Game Day traffic and weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victorico's Mexican Food. Order Victorico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victoricos.com.
Thanks, Buck. To be expected, pretty heavy traffic coming out of the Corvallis area. Pretty red on the road up north going to 99W out of Corvallis. Same story on Highway 34, either going out towards I-5 or Philomath. Do see some smokies once you get to I-5 northbound. There's 3, actually, between the Highway 34 and the Santiam Highway exits. Right now, you're looking at 71 in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 57. Tomorrow, cloudy and a high of 69.
Bellagio's Pizza, a local favorite since 1996. This is Mike Barrett. There are 13 locations in our area now, and it's never been easier to order. You can order online or download the Bellagio's app and start building loyalty reward points. Bellagio's has stayed loyal to their customers by still making their famous dough and sauce daily in Wilsonville. I love that they've stayed true to their brand and culture, and you can taste it. Locally owned, proud, and grateful. Bellagio's Pizza, the very best.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising! After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?
It wasn't the internet, and it wasn't the Warehouse Club.
But?
It was video only. They had better deals on the Samsung, LG, and the Sony TVs that got the highest scores.
Better than online and at the club?
I know! Video only beat them all. And now we can afford an even better model for the same price. My research really paid off.
If we buy it video only.
Exactly. Otherwise, we'll be sorry.
At video only, you Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show. The number 9 Ducks, 49-14 winners over the Oregon State Beavers. And one individual who I know is very excited about that because I could hear his enthusiasm coming through in our text conversation. The former Ducks great, former NFL great, 4-0 as a Duck against the Beavers in these Civil Wars, including a 3-interception performance in his final Civil War. Anthony Newman is with us. Anthony, how are you feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling great. That was outstanding. That was just outstanding. It really was.
There was a ton to like about that performance, whether it was on offense, defense, or special teams. But of everything that you could have liked, what stood out to you the most, and what was most significant in the victory today?
Well, you know what I'm going to say. The offensive line. I mean, did they go get a whole new group of guys and brought them back and say, okay, hey, you guys play now and let's throw away the other guys? That didn't happen. I think what happened was the running game was honestly the running game was unstoppable because of the running backs, the yak yards after contact. We didn't see that the first two games. And we saw George James just breaking tackles left and right. And then Noah Winnington was doing all that running, falling down on the ground, but still not down, getting extra yards. That's huge, and it helps the offensive line. And then when they do create some holes, they're running scot-free. And then the passing game opens up. They didn't even touch Dylan. The defensive line for Oregon State didn't even touch him. It was unreal. Unreal.
Anthony, I know early on in the game, it felt like Oregon State was able to at least keep it in third and manageable situations where they were able to pick up a lot of first downs on the ground. What adjustments did you see Oregon make defensively, or did guys just start winning one-on-one matchups, and that's why Oregon State wasn't able to run the ball as effectively in the second half?
Good call, Will. It's one-on-one matchups. One-on-one, get off the block and make a tackle. And that's the biggest thing as a defensive guy. You have to get off the ball. You have to get off the guy that's blocking you. Use your hands. Have that extension and make tackles. And that's what we saw from the Oregon's defense. And then for the Oregon's offense, the offensive line, and you know this, they were finishing blocks. They were taking their defensive linemen to the ground. They weren't allowing defensive linemen to get off the block. So that's why the running game for Oregon was so good the first half and the second half. And the running game for Oregon State was okay the first half, but hey, they shut them down the second half. They didn't run the football hardly at all. But it's different when you have to try to come back. You're down 14 points, down 21 points. You got to start throwing the football.
Anthony, I don't want to try to soil this victory at all, but there are a couple concerns just from the first half. As Will mentioned, the defense did have to tighten up a little bit later in the game. But you're a coach. You coached the defense out at West Linn and obviously played this game for a very long time. It felt like one of the things the Ducks were struggling with early in this game were getting off the field on third down and tackling. And what are the ways that you can coach that up? Is that just based on will and desire, or are there things that you can do differently from an execution standpoint?
Well, tackling it's all about Well, I shouldn't say that. There's fundamentals in tackling. I understand that, but it's all about the heart. What kind of heart do you have? Dedication, desire to go tackle the guy with the ball, and do you want to tackle him or don't you? And then the technique, falls in place where you got to grab cloth. Your head has to be up. You got to wrap your arms around the guy. You got to hold on. If you're a smaller guy, you got to gator roll and get that big guy down. And then sometimes let's give credit to the running backs. They're good. They make people miss. They do a good job of lowering their shoulder and creating that contact and bouncing off and keeping their legs going. So you just have to tackle well as a defender and use your technique, but also have that heart to go get a guy. Go make sure that guy gets on the ground. And that's what Oregon was doing. And again, I still want to give credit to the Oregon State running backs. They are good running backs. I'm not going to lie. They can run the football. They run it well. I think the passing game is not there for them, so it hurts them because everybody can load the box and try to stop the running game for Oregon State, and that's what Oregon did as well.
Anthony, we're going into the first bye week of the Oregon Ducks season. What do you want to see changes made or things need to get tuned up? What do you want to see Oregon make a big change in, or even a small one when they get ready to go and play UCLA in 2 weeks?
Well, it's kind of hard after seeing this game and then watching the first two games because you saw a huge change within those last two games in this game. It was like, okay, well, they're blocking better offensive line. The defensive guys are tackling better. They're making big plays in the back end. The receivers are catching balls. I would like to see more balls caught. There's some drops that are there, but now you start getting, I'm getting picky. I mean, come on. I mean, they dropped a couple of balls, but they caught 20 balls. I don't know, So, and then the third down is big, for Oregon's offense to convert on third down, which they did, but it was really bad, the first two games.
Right.
So there was improvement. All you want to see from a football team is improvement every single day. When you go into the bye week, it's all about individual improvement, meaning work on your tackling, work on your blocking technique, working on catching the ball. You're not going to worry about schemes and all that stuff. We're trying to prepare for an opponent. No, you need to take care of yourself, get healthy, and work on your technique.
That is Anthony Newman, the former Ducks DB and NFL legend as well. You can hear him every Monday on Ducks Roundtable with us at 7 o'clock, as well as the Ducks Game Day Show on Saturday mornings. Anthony, enjoy the victory. Thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Great stuff, as always, from Anthony Newman. Will, I want to dig into a little bit more on the defensive performance from today because – especially in the second half, it felt like they clamped down on everything. Run, pass, what have you. It seemed miserable for the Oregon State offense trying to get through. I want to ask you a few more questions about that, including the performance we saw from Bryce Betcher. How much of that is him? How much of that is the guys around him? We'll get into all that coming up on the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show. But first, it's time for Ducks Game Day Traffic and Weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victorricos.com.
All right, thank you, Buck. Looking at some very heavy traffic out of Corvallis. Pretty much all directions, I-5 northbound, kind of slow once you get out to there from Albany as well. But beware, if you're trying to get out of Corvallis and go up 99W going north, that's going to be a while. 34 going east and west, pretty sluggish as well. Seeing two Smokies on I-5 right in between Highway 34 and the Santiam Highway exit up to Albany. Right now, 71 in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calling for a low of 57. Tomorrow, cloudy and a high of 69.
This is the day of the big sale at your gift shop.
Welcome in. Trayshawn Holden. I thought Gabriel might take off and run, but he waited, and Holden got free in the back of the end zone, and Gabriel found him for the touchdown.
Highlights, scores, and more. This is the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show on the Odyssey app and Portland's sports leader, 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show. Ryan Buckley, Will Ortner, Jordan Schultz here with you. Coming up, we'll hear from Andy Dirt Johnson and Dusty Hera. But right now, what I want to dive into with you, Will, as the Ducks winners today, 49-14, the defensive performance. Yep. It seemed that early on, as we referenced with Anthony Newman, there were some drives kept alive that you might have liked to see some stops a little bit earlier on. But what were the adjustments that you saw with them tightening everything up? And overall, how did you evaluate and grade their performance today?
I'm not upset with how the Oregon defense played. I think early on they were a little bit surprised. I think they thought they were going to win more one-on-one matchups with the D-line going up against Oregon State's O-line. I don't want to say that they didn't give them enough credit, but maybe they overinflated what they felt like they could do on that defensive line. Because against Boise State and against Idaho, they really had created havoc, but the strength of that Oregon State offense is going to be on that two-headed running back tandem that they have in the backfield, and then that offensive line, and then whatever McCoy can add when he's added into the +1 run game. And that's really what ate them alive. Like, they forced a 3rd and 15 or whatever it was on the first drive, and Matui Uiagalelei just took the wrong route when he came in because he got into the backfield free, and McCoy was able to just kind of flip around and get outside the pocket, and then he ran for the big gain. If Uiagalelei high points that and he goes towards the back shoulder of that quarterback, he's there to make a play if he tries to step up, and if he tries to whip around back outside like he did, he runs right into Uiagalelei and it's a sack. So I really feel like they just thought that they would win more of their one-on-one matchups early, and they didn't. And so then they made the adjustment to add another player into the box. Once you do that, now the Oregon State double teams in the run game. They can't stay on for as long as they want to. They have to come off. And then that leads to Harmon, that leads to Tuioti, that leads to Uiagalelei, that leads to Birch being able to now get off of those blocks quicker. And now they're making that stop for a 2-yard gain instead of a 4-yard gain like they were early on.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it did feel like you started to get maybe I don't know if it's fair to say more push from those guys later in the game, and I don't know if it's just the size wearing them down, but one of the other things that I saw, and I know that the national broadcast on television was making a lot of the Bryce Betcher's also a baseball player storyline. They couldn't stop talking about it. This is something we've known for a long time, but I just thought he had one of his best games of the season, or one of the best games that I've seen. And maybe that's, and you can explain a little bit more about why he was freed up to do so, but whether it was somewhere near the sideline, over the middle of the field, whether it was in the backfield, whether it was stopping in run support for somebody else, it just felt like he was around the ball all day. And sure enough, he leads the team in tackles again with 10 today. But whether it was his performance or the guys around him, what did you see that enabled that? I just felt like early on when they were getting those double teams, what Oregon State was doing was they were making sure they were taking care of the D lineman first. And so Betcher was able to ID, oh, hey, here comes the double team, and then I can get off. And then he was making great one-on-one tackles. Now, the reason why Oregon they're always going to be okay with their middle linebacker making tackles, but the reason why Oregon State was okay with the middle linebacker making tackles is because Betcher is making that tackle at a 3-yard gain. And when you have a running back tandem like they have between Griffin and Hankerson, they're going to fall forward. Well, if on first down you get 3 to 4, and then on second down you get 3 to 4, well, now you have third and manageable. And that's all Oregon State was really trying to do in this game. They wanted to hold on to the football. They wanted to have 6, 7, 8-minute score drives so that they could keep the ball out of Oregon's offense's hands. And so I think early on what they were doing was, we're okay if Bryce Betcher makes these tackles, and Bryce Betcher was making really good plays, because if he doesn't make those tackles, those are now big-time runs. Yeah. But Oregon State was going to live with Bryce Betcher having a big game. And so what I think they did is they allowed Tuioti to kind of play more into the box. Like, he was hanging more on the outside and almost acting as like an outside linebacker, D-end, rushing hard off the edge. They move him more into the middle. And then once they did that, now Oregon State has to account for Tuioti more, and they can't sit on those double teams as long.
And if you don't sit on a double team on a guy like Derek Harmon, he's going to get off and he's going to start making plays. And that's when you saw Oregon's defense of line starting to get more tackles. And when the D-line's getting more tackles, that's usually only going to be a 2-yard gain, sometimes even a 1 or a tackle for loss. And so that's where you saw the big changes. You are getting bigger stops on first down because you added another into the box, and then Oregon State had to throw, and Oregon State just isn't built to throw like that.
And I guess that brings me to my next question for you, which is maybe it's hard to say a quiet day for the Oregon secondary, but because Oregon's front seven was able to play so well, Giovanni McCoy still threw the ball 36 times, but like it never really felt like he had anyone seriously open, any big shots available. It just seemed like a super pedestrian day for their quarterback, and one mostly made difficult by good secondary play.
Right. Well, and like the big plays for Oregon State is Walker catching a halo screen, which is just a simple bubble screen, and then making a guy miss or two.
Yeah, he had about 15 of those.
Right. And that's why he has 8 catches and he has 11 targets, but they're all for his long on the day is 14 yards. Like you don't see that when you have a wide receiver with 8 catches.
Yeah.
And so I felt like what Oregon did a good job of was knowing, hey, they're eventually going to make a mistake. And so we're going to keep everything in front of us. And as long as we do that, eventually we're going to get a tackle for a loss, or they're going to have a penalty, and then they're going to be behind the sticks, and then they have to try and challenge us in the secondary, and McCoy just isn't a quarterback that's going to beat this Oregon Ducks secondary. So I think that Oregon just kind of played the waiting game and knew that eventually their talent was going to wear down Oregon State, and it did.
Well, I want to get to someone else who I know has an opinion on this game, and that is Andy Dirt Johnson. I know the first couple weeks have been a little bit rough on Dirt. He hosts the pregame show, and we're going to get his thoughts coming up next on the Pacific Office Automation postgame scoreboard show. But first, we'll toss it over to Schulte, who has the Ducks game day traffic and weather brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victorricos.com. Here's Schulte.
Thank you, Buck. Still very heavy out of Corvallis right now. Trying to get to I-5, either from Corvallis on Highway 34 or on Highway 20 through Albany. It's pretty messy. Just expect at least a half an hour extra added to your drive out to the highway. And going north on 99W, still sluggish as well. I do see one smoky that's between the Highway 34 exit, actually one hanging around right there at the Highway 34 exit, and then one just a couple of miles north as you're going towards the San Em highway exit. And right now, it is 71 degrees in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 57 tomorrow, cloudy, and a high of 69.
Your home for Oregon Ducks football is KFXX KWJJ HD2 Portland.
Intercepted! Nice
1080 The Fan. An Odyssey station. We're back with a complete recap of today's game.
Second down at about 15. Here's the keep. Turn it up. Nice run. Gabriel's got her own 30. Down the side 20. A block. Inside the 5. Touchdown, Dylan Gabriel.
With the coaches and players you want to hear. Your feedback on the contest. Scores and highlights from across the country. Ducks postgame traffic reports. And analysis from your game day crew. This is the Ducks postgame scoreboard show on 1080 The Fan. Oregon Ducks football on 1080 The Fan is brought to you by Coors Light, Pacific Office Automation, Mods PDX, Victor Rico's Mexican Food, Legends Casino Hotel and Toppenish, by Zoom Care, Bellagio's Pizza, Multnomah County Behavioral Health Division, Audi Wilsonville, Laurelhurst Market, by Unitas Community Credit Union, and by Langdon Farms Golf Club. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Buckley and Will Ortner. The Ducks postgame scoreboard show on 1080 The Fan.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation scoreboard show. 49-14 the final. Your number 9 Oregon Ducks victorious as they go into Reser Stadium and put a whooping down on their in-state rival. Joining us now, a man who I know has had some tense moments early in this season, and we'll be sure to discuss them 6 to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday this upcoming week. It is Andy Dirt Johnson. Dirt, I want to start with this. How has your outlook on the Ducks changed from how it was about 5 hours ago?
You know, it's definitely changed because at least we finally have the proof that we needed to know we weren't all crazy in the offseason. Like, this is a good football team. And I think that was the hardest part the first 2 weeks of the season was that what you were watching like your eyes didn't compute with your brain. It just didn't make sense. And you could tell me that Oregon's not one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. Like, whatever, that's fine.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I refuse to believe that they were that bad. And I like this matchup. So I kind of came into this game confident, liking their chances to pull away, especially in the second half. And it's just nice to finally see that there's something there that they're putting together and they're finding their rhythm offensively. And now the sky's the limit on where they can go the rest of the way.
Dirt, when you watched this game, obviously there had been a lot of talk about the offensive line. What did you feel like you saw from the O-line, and do you finally have confidence that this is the offense that we will see the rest of the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agreed, right? If you watch the second half last week, they found a little bit of a rhythm. And if they just didn't do the dumbest thing humanly possible multiple times in the second half of that game, they win it by 10 or 14 and they pull away. But you're driving to go up by 2 scores and you fumble with Patrick Herbert. You give up the long touchdown run, and then you have the dumb snap, fumble run by Gabriel, and they shot themselves in the foot so many times. But when you took those plays away, which is hard to do because they damn near lost the game, I think we all could agree that offensive line found a rhythm. They were running the football more consistently. The numbers that were jumping off the page from that game with that offensive line compared to the group when Pickett was in, it was night and day different. And so going into this one, I think we were questioning, can they communicate on the road and how are the checks and calls going to be at the line of scrimmage in a raucous environment? But, man, they looked awesome, and they didn't even have Bedford back in the game. I don't know how many times Dylan Gabriel was touched, but not a lot of them jump out of my mind thinking back, right? Throughout the course of the game, he had time. And I think what it allowed Will Stein to do was to call a much more comfortable game because they weren't behind the chains constantly. There weren't holding penalties. There weren't alignment issues, 2nd and 15, constantly backed up. And so they stayed ahead of the chains. The penalties were down. They were getting good push up front, and that allowed Will Stein to get into his bag of tricks. And I thought he called an excellent game today, but it was largely aided, I think, by the way they played up front and the confidence that they had in that group.
Yeah, it seemed like they were firing on all cylinders offensively, and when you have the protection they had today combined with the embarrassment of riches at the skill positions,
right.
it's hard not to be tremendously successful. Obviously, now we go into a bye week before we start conference play in a new conference, the Big Ten. I don't know if your expectations have changed at all, but now having 3 games under our belts to have seen this team, what are your expectations for conference play, and what is your realistic goal for this team for conference play?
I mean, look, it's great to see him play at this level, and now I think the next challenge is going to be, can you go back it up? The saving grace for me after the Boise State game was your schedule's not that hard until October 12th. No offense to Oregon State, but that's not a great team. They're one-dimensional on offense. You got Michigan State coming to town in a couple of weeks. You go on the road to UCLA. I know Michigan State lit up Baylor School for the Blind today, but they haven't looked great their first 2 games of the season. UCLA's, hanging in tough against Hawaii in their first game. So you were going to be able to kind of navigate, even if you weren't playing at your best, and you had a few weeks to figure it out. Now you've shown this, and now it's about go do it again. You got a bye week. It's going to give you an extra week to get healthy. We've mentioned Bedford 8 million times in the first month of the season. He should be back for that game. Boss is banged up, so that will be a huge help for them early. But I think my tune will change a little bit on what the ceiling is for this team if we see them go do this to UCLA on the road in 2 weeks, and then we see them go do this to Michigan State in that Friday night game. I'm just backing it up. I mean, you have so much more talent than the teams that you're playing. So if they go do it 2 more times, man, I think we're back to where we were preseason. I was never fully, off board, jumping off the bandwagon. It was just about they needed to eventually show you this. They did today, and now we go do it again in 2 weeks, hopefully on the road against UCLA.
You weren't jumping off the boat, but you were just kind of checking out where the dinghies were, right? You were looking on the map, just like, hey.
You got to be prepared, man. You never know when an iceberg's going to come.
Do I think that water is cold or warm?
If I find a door,
pop up in Corvallis, you got to be prepared to jump off the boat at any time, man. But you wait until the right moment, and thankfully I held on long enough.
Smart. So it's a long look ahead right now when we look at this UCLA game. But defensively, what do you expect the defense to do? Maybe even give a point number there on how much they're giving up. And then offensively, what do you expect? Is it a successful game if you win by 20? Or is it not a successful game until you see Dante Moore getting more snaps, at the end of the fourth quarter?
I mean, I think that's how we gauge him now, right? It was great to finally see him in a game. And a lot of the other young guys, that's been one of the key negatives of the first 2 weeks is that they've had so many young freshmen that they want to give snaps to, but the games are too uncomfortable. You haven't been able to play them. So I think, that's my barometer for UCLA and Michigan State. You should blow both those teams out. Now that you've found your rhythm offensively. I think they just showed how talented Gabriel is, all the skill guys you guys are mentioning. The running game got going. Like, the offense should be humming, I think, from this point forward. Defensively, man, like, I know it was frustrating in the first half watching some of those third down conversions, but you go back that first drive of the game, you got him in 3rd and 15, and you just lose track of McCoy. He's a good athlete. Like, it's going to happen. And then on their second touchdown drive, you have a call that's, if the ball is in the air, I think it was Hankerson that was trying to make that catch. Like, if that ball bobbles for a millisecond longer, Oregon State's punting there. Maybe it's 30-7 at the halftime, and you're not quite feeling as nervous maybe as some fans were. So defensively, they still got to clean up the tackling issues. They still got to clean up their play against screens. The screens got them again, and that's been kind of a theme of the first 3 weeks. But I like where they're at just in terms of the way that they've developed, and knowing that Bassa, who you can argue is the best guy that they have on that group, isn't even playing 100% of the snaps because of his injury. So you get healthier, and I think they should only continue to improve on that side of the ball.
I'll get you out here on this dirt. Your co-host is a Beaver. I know that you guys always have something at stake. What is the bet that Brandon Sprague will be paying off this week? And additionally, what are the headlines that are going to be headlining your show from 6 to 9 a.m. on Monday morning?
I mean, I think this would be the top one, right? Oregon finding their groove, and then you can't think of a better way to finish the day than watching the Huskies lose like 90 seconds after that Oregon game. Just a perfect twofer right there. We actually didn't do a bet this year.
No
I don't
bet
know if
this
it was
year. Okay.
No, week 3, Mountain West. I've had a really hard time, and I was always hoping that Oregon State would get back into a conference because it's weird punching down. Like, making fun of them doesn't feel the same as it has in the last couple of years. So I took it easy on him. But, look, he ran his mouth a little bit, so we're going to have a lot of fun on Monday. I've had to come in the last 2 Mondays and do shows when Oregon barely beat Idaho and struggled with Boise State. And everybody's asking, are we out on landing? Is the honeymoon over? It's like, oh, God, take a deep breath. So I'm looking forward to Monday, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
The step back from the ledge Monday morning catharsis. Yeah, we'll look forward to it.
Right.
6 9 a.m. Andy Dirt Johnson, appreciate the time as always.
All right, boys. Have a good one.
Coming up next, want to get into something that was bandied about all week and is Will's wheelhouse of expertise. That is the offensive line. Heard some really things from Pancho Laloulu in the postgame with Dusty Hera. We're going to hear those thoughts and also get Will's breakdown of everything they got right today against the Beavers. That's coming up next. But first, Schultze has your Ducks game day traffic and weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victorico's Mexican Food. Order Victorico's for your game day celebration in-store or online, pickup or delivery at victoricos.com.
Thank you, Buck. Some bad news for people that are trying to head back from the Corvallis area. An accident reported in the last few minutes, I-5 northbound at the north end of Albany. It's a pretty significant backup there. Of course, you've also got that stretching onto Highway 20, all those people coming up from the Corvallis area trying to slip past I-5 through Albany, not necessarily working, and 99W slow going north out of Corvallis as well. Beware Smokies on Highway 34, both sides of the interstate highway, and then I-5 north as you get on from Highway 34. 70 in Portland with some rain falling right now. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 57. Tomorrow, cloudy and a high of 69.
For over 45 years, Pacific Office Automation has been providing winning
for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation postgame scoreboard show. It feels like it was the number one topic of Northwest sports talk conversation all week. It was the Oregon offensive line. They got, I wouldn't say they got pushed around against Boise, but they had some surprising blown coverages, some issues giving Gabriel the time he needed to hit some of his targets, and a lot of armchair quarterbacking, or at least armchair O-line coaching this week. I know we talked about it on our show Primetime. It's Ryan Buckley here with Will Ortner and Jordan Schultz. Will, the O-line was your wheelhouse, and when we heard this this exchange between Dusty Hera and Pancho Laloulu after the game, you're like, that's everything right there. So first, I want to listen to that exchange, and then I want to get your thoughts on what the Oregon O-line did today.
Pancho, what a heck of a performance this offensive line puts out on the field today. Playing center, you moved over from the guard where you've been starting the first couple of games. What clicked for you guys up front?
Obviously, we've been crafting on the things that, where we needed some areas to fix, especially the penalties and stuff, and like some technique and fundamental stuff. This week we went back to the basics. We say, hey, we're going to go back to the basics, start to, work on the hands, on our feet, and like chasing the ball and stuff, and try to eliminate negative plays. That was something Coach Lanning said through this week of one of our big things that us as an offensive unit and an offensive line, that if we can eliminate those negative plays and those penalties, we can have big plays and scores like we just had today.
It always did seem like through the first couple of weeks it was the correctable errors. But when you guys are assessing that as a group, you guys are a position group where 5 guys have to work as one. How is that growth kind of amplified over the first 3 weeks of the season?
Yeah, obviously, the first 2 weeks, we didn't play up to par and up to our standard, as an offensive line or as a unit. But this week we kind of, like we said, we're going to go back to the basics. And as of like me, when they told me I was going to be the center this week, I took that initiative and to be that leader, especially being the young dude out of the whole line, but to be that leader for the guys, try to get them and gel together and let them know like, hey, we gotta play up to our standard, and we just got to go back to the basics and just play with great technique, great hands, and great feet.
Yeah, it's stuff like that where Pancho's talking about we had to be on the same page. We had to be moving together. We had to get back to the basics. We had to stop trying to do too much. Just do your job. And I know it gets to that old adage of like, well, Bill Belichick says this, and the only, written slogan they have on their wall in the Patriots facility when Bill Belichick was there was do your job. But at some point, it does come down to just do your job. Don't try and make the special play. Get everyone on the same page. And it felt like Pancho, at least the last 6 quarters, where he's really taken over that center role. Mm-hmm. He's done that. He's made sure guys are moving together. And if you are wrong, you're all wrong together. So that way, at least you know what you're trying to do. I felt like Oregon did a great job, too, of getting onto linebackers this week. It felt like the last couple weeks, they weren't getting to that second level. They were getting stuck in double teams. Sometimes they were going the wrong way. If a polar was coming across, he was getting picked off because someone was getting pushed back because they were getting hit in a spot where they weren't expecting to, or they were just flat out losing a one-on-one battle. And so it felt like finally, you had everyone on the same page moving as one, and it felt like everyone finally had that determination of, I'm going to get my job done, not I hope I get my job done. And that's what it felt like the first couple weeks.
So you reference everyone getting on the same page and playing as one, and I completely get that importance. But also there were some people who needed to improve individually in what they were doing. Who did you see make strides from last week to this week individually on that line?
Well, I'm always going to lean on Pancho because he is playing the most difficult position, I believe, on that offensive line. You are the person who is responsible for setting the protection. You are the person who is responsible for setting who the play side A-gap defender is, and that's going to determine the count that the offensive line has. But I also want to talk about Connerly. I felt like he finally had that game where there were no stupid mistakes. Like, I felt like against Idaho,
that group had 0 penalties today.
Right, and against Idaho, it's, Connerly takes a bad set because, this is an inferior opponent. I don't have to be as precise with my technique. So then he gets beat in a one-on-one matchup. Or against Boise State, you're going on a big, long drive for a touchdown, and I'm not going to make sure that my head is in my center's hip. That's a simple focus penalty. It's not jumping off sides. In this game, everyone was on the same page. No one jumped off sides. There wasn't a bad snap that came from the center position. And then at left tackle, when you needed to get an outside reach so that Jordan James could hit the edge, you got the outside reach. When you needed to drive block someone, it got done. And when you had to take on a pass rush from Oregon, because Oregon State still brought a lot of fire zones at Dillon Gabriel, that offensive line stood tall, and I really feel like at left tackle with Connor Lee, he stood the most tall, where I felt like a lot of his issues were self-inflicted in the first 2 weeks, and they finally weren't there this week.
Can I chime in really quickly with a question just on kind of the personnel and how we saw Struthers at the left guard position, and thankfully Poncho back at center, which that's where the line seems to be best with Poncho is at center. Can you explain the school of thought, Will, as to like why it took them 3 games to get to that point? I get you want to give Pickard a shot, but I just wonder why moving your most talented lineman off that position is a positive in Oregon's mind for the first 2 games. Obviously, they're not doing it anymore, but I'm wondering why we even got to this point or how.
Well, without being there at actual practice, my assumption would be you think that the backup center is better than the backup guard, because Poncho was still playing, right? Poncho's playing that right guard position. It wasn't like he was out. And I think going into this year, the assumption was that Bedford was going to be your center.
Yeah.
And so it made sense for Poncho to be at right guard because you want your best 5 out there. So then the problem is when you have that injury at center, well, Pickard's been playing center and he's been in your system for multiple years. That's what worked with Alex Forsythe. That's what worked with JPJ. Well, we'll just move him there, and then we can keep Poncho at right. And then there's the least amount of movement possible, because a lot of people will look at O-line play and just go, well, if you can play right guard, you can play left. And it's just not the same. Does it happen? Yes. And
you don't want to, like, you don't, to steal an old phrase, you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul. Like, you don't want to, if you have a good guy at a good position, just because he can do the other, you don't want to sacrifice the one that he's good at.
Right. Well, and I'm not here to just totally, blame everything on Pickard, because it wasn't just on him. But it does feel like now you have a more cohesive unit. And I understand why they originally went with him at center. It makes sense. Hey, I have to move the least amount of people around. Everyone gets to kind of play their same spots. We're going to be okay. You also have to remember, Poncho's young. Most starting centers start out at right guard or left guard, and then you move inside. And so I think also there's a little bit of a hesitation of, we have a young guy. He hasn't gotten a ton of time on the offensive line, especially at that center spot. Maybe that might be too much for him to handle right away. And so I think they went with what offensive line unit they thought would work the best at the time. And as real bullets start flying, it's a lot different than a practice where you can, hey, check, I need help here. Or, there's your focus is just, sometimes you get too keyed up. Sometimes you miss things. Sometimes you go whiteboard and all of a sudden you forget exactly what you were supposed to do. So I feel like they went with the group that they thought would be the most successful, and then they weren't afraid to pivot once they realized that group wasn't working. And so that's also the sign of a good coaching staff, of being able to, hey, we tried this thing. We made sure it didn't work before we made the adjustment.
Yeah, you don't abandon it until you know.
We made the right adjustment, and it completely changed how this offense has moved.
So we've talked about how this line kept Dillon Gabriel upright and clean all day. They did a really nice job just keeping him protected. Not only no sacks, but very few hurries or even pressures. The run game has been outstanding. They averaged 7.5 yards a carry today. Jordan James goes for 12 carries for 86 yards, 7.2 for him. Obviously, Gabriel rips off the big run. But what is working well, or at least started working well and consistently for this O-line and just the run game group today? How much of it's the running backs? Essentially making their reads right? How much is the O-line being in the right spot? How much is all of that? Because I feel like at times against Idaho, against Boise State, when you were wanting to lean on that run game, you weren't necessarily able to. It was a little bit hit and miss. Today, it felt like they got whatever they needed when they needed it. What did you see in that regard from that perspective of the game?
Well, I saw 2 things. I saw everyone being on the same page when it came to zone. Now, the problem with zone is there's a couple different ways to run it, but the main way that most teams like to run it is if it's zone right, it's a cylinder step right. So basically everyone on the offensive line is taking a step to the right, and then you surge. If there's a guy in your right side gap, you're going to take him. If he's not in your right side gap, you're going to move up to the linebacker. That's the simplest way for me to explain it. The reason why you need a center keeping everyone on point is he's going to make the determination of who the play side A-gap defender is. That person is going to be the 0. The 0 gets blocked by the center. And then you count it out. 1, 2, and 3. 3 gets blocked by tight ends or wide receivers. 2s get blocked by the tackles. 1s get blocked by the guards. And then if they do any gap exchanges or stunts or twists, then you just pick up who happens to be in your gap. 1 could become 2, 2 could become 1, and vice versa. If the 3 looks like he's about to make a play for 2 or less, they're going to push the call, and then that moves everything over 1. It's very complicated, and you have to be able to do that all while almost not even talking at different times. You just all have to see that. Mm-hmm. And so if there's confusion at left tackle about where the point might even be set, you're going to go to the wrong guy because you think you're going to your 2 at the linebacker, but really the point's been moved, and so now you're missing out on that tackle. The other big addition that I saw, Dylan Gabriel adding into the +1 run game. And that meant that Oregon State had to stay home on Dylan Gabriel, and they couldn't commit 6 or 7 into the box.
It does feel like it's such a big difference when just the threat of that is there, especially when you show it early.
And once they did that, that allowed that run game to really be more even numbers between the O-line and tight ends versus the defense. And now you have Jordan James running free, and you have Noah Whittington running free, and they were actually making guys miss and not getting tackled by shoestring tackles. I was very, very impressed with the growth, and now you have to assume that growth will only continue. The interesting thing will be, now that you have the bye week, and we've seen that Matthew Bedford is back. He was working with the 2s.
He was off the injury report pregame.
Do you go back to the original lineup where Bedford moves to center and you move Poncho back to right guard? Or do you stick with this group because it's the hot hand? Time will only tell.
Be interested to see what that lineup looks like against UCLA, but coming up, we need to shift gears. I have an idea where this is going this week. It's our Bellagio's Pizza Very Best Player of the Game. We'll get to that in our next segment. Plus, Dusty Hera coming up on the road home from Corvallis. He was on the sidelines today for the game with the Toyota sideline microphone on the broadcast. We'll get to all of that, but first, we'll toss it over to Schulte, who has the Ducks game day traffic and weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victorico's Mexican Food. Order Victorico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victoricos.com.
Thank you, Buck. We're seeing some clearing up in Corvallis. If you're trying to get out to I-5, 34 is not looking too bad once you get on there, but Highway 20 up to that point, trying to get out of Corvallis is still pretty sluggish. 99W clear, at least going out of that immediate area. Once you get to Monmouth, going north, you're still looking at slowing through that area. And then Highway 20 through Albany, slow as you get to I-5. There's a crash I-5 northbound right at that 99 East split. It's got people backed up for at least 20 minutes or so on I-5 as well. Right now, 69 degrees in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 57 tomorrow, cloudy, and a high of 69.
Bellagio's Pizza, Northwest owned and operated since 1996.
Game Scoreboard Show on 1080 The Fan.
Throws, end zone, caught, touchdown. Trayshawn Holden with his 7th touchdown reception of the year.
It's time for the Bellagio's Pizza Very Best Player of the Game. Pay attention. Our expert panel will select the very best player of the game. And when you hear the text to win cue in the noon hour of Monday's Danny and Dusty Show, you could win a free pizza from Bellagio's.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show. And yeah, you heard it in the imaging right there. It is time for our Bellagio's Pizza Very Best Player of the Game. The Very Best Player of the Game is brought to you by Bellagio's. Remember that the player of the game once Will Ortner gives it to us, and when you hear the text to win cue in the noon hour of Monday's Danny and Dusty Show, you could win a free, delicious pizza from Bellagio's. All right, Will. It's that time. I thought I knew you were going with this before the break.
Yeah.
I confirmed it in the break, but it's someone we actually haven't talked a ton about today. Who is your Bellagio's very best player of the game?
Well, it has to be the quarterback, Dillon Gabriel. Not only did he get engaged this week, so that already put him up some style points for me.
Congratulations on having a wife or a wife-to-be. That's
Fiance.
wonderful. Yeah.
I heard those are wonderful. Would love to find one time.
You're young. It'll happen.
That's right. He went 20 for 24, 291, 2 tuds. Obviously, that's going to be 83% completion. But the other big stat for him, he had 4 rushes, 64 yards, and a touchdown. Obviously, the long coming at 54 yards, and that ended up being their second touchdown. I just felt like Dillon Gabriel, for the first time that we've seen him as the quarterback of the Oregon Ducks, was in complete control. He knew where he wanted to put the football. If he needed to run, he ran, and he outran everybody. If he had an open wide receiver, he didn't miss them. He put the ball on him, and they were able to make explosive plays this game. At one point, I saw when it came to plays of 20 or more, in the first 2 games, they had 6 against Oregon State. Oregon had 7, and that was still with about 10 minutes to go in the fourth.
Yeah, I think they finished with 8 or 9 of those. But yeah, they had more than they had all season leading up to it.
Very impressed.
It feels like he's making the right calls, the right checks, and he's getting through his progression a little bit more. Some of that, I would imagine, is because of the time that he's getting, but it also just seems like he's making very savvy veteran decisions. He's rarely putting the team in position to turn the ball over, and he's almost always hitting a receiver who's open. I don't feel like he's trying to fit it into very tight windows. Granted, it may be because he has amazing receivers who can get themselves open.
Yeah.
That's a big part of this. But the thing that really stood out to me today, and I wonder if it buys him more opportunity in this area of his game throughout the season, and that was the running game today, especially on that speed option where they got the matchup they needed. They realized if they could make the one guy miss, they'd have it, and he gives that one quick little ball fake, and he's gone. It reminded me of how Marcus Mariota used to run, where it wasn't a lot of dancing around, but it was like, I know that if I can just make the right fake and the right read to get by this guy, I've got the wheels. But what he showed me today was that he could run without putting himself at risk. There were a couple times where he picked up 4 or 5 yards on the rollout, but he got out of bounds, and he didn't risk getting hit near the sideline, and he didn't risk getting hit sliding over the middle. And I wonder if offensively he'll get more of an opportunity to use his legs to generate plays because of the fact he's proving he can keep himself safe out there.
Right. I also think that's a major part of his game. Like when he was at Oklahoma and when he was at UCF, he ran all the time, and he's a smaller guy, so I understand why Coach Stein and Coach Lanning might, be telling him, hey, let's just try and get the ball in our skill players' hands. There's a reason why they're at running back and receiver and tight end. We want to see them try and make guys miss and take those hits and not you. But at the same time, you don't want to hamstring a guy when he has that athletic ability. And anytime you can add a quarterback into the +1 run game, it completely changes what a defense has to do in coverage. If they have to spend one linebacker or one safety where they are just spying on Dillon Gabriel,
making sure you don't take off like that,
it completely changes the one-on-one matchups, and now you're going to have more opportunities for Tez Johnson or for Evan Stewart or Trayshawn Holden, who has just exploded this year, to be in one-on-one matchups. I like those guys in one-on-one coverage. I feel like they're going to win more than they lose, and that's going to be a big deal, too, for Oregon as they look for more and more explosives.
Yeah, it does feel like, as you look at the box score, like I feel like on any given play, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, Evan Stewart, they could all win their matchup, and so can Terrence Ferguson for that matter. So it's an embarrassment of riches for Dillon Gabriel, but today he played nearly a perfect game with his legs, with his arm, with his reads, and obviously, most importantly, gets the massive W in the Civil War with the 49-14 victory as the number 9 Ducks take down the Beavers in Corvallis. Coming up next, we will talk to a man who was boots on the ground in Corvallis today. He had the Toyota sideline mic. Dusty Hera was on the radio broadcast. You heard him right here on 1080 The Fan, and we will get to him next. But first, we'll toss it over to Schultze with the Ducks game day traffic and weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victorricos.com.
Appreciate it, Buck. Looks like Corvallis traffic is starting to loosen up a little bit, although beware if you're headed north on 99W. I do see a couple of smokies, one near the Lewisburg Avenue intersection, and then one near Arnold Avenue as well, just past Riles. Once again, those are both 99W northbound. Slowing on I-5 north through Albany. That crash, though, earlier, blocking traffic is cleared. Now that chunk of traffic moving up, though, as it's going north to Salem. 69 in Portland right now. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 57. Tomorrow, cloudy with a high of 69.
Isaac Ropp, if soggy fall and winter golf bugs you like it does me,
And you're home for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation postgame scoreboard show. The number 9 Ducks, 49-14 winners in Corvallis today. They thump the Beavers. And a man who was on the sideline today and on his way back from Corvallis right now, one Dusty Hera. And Dusty, the first thing I'm always interested in finding out from you is just how did things look from your vantage point on the sidelines today? What stood out being field level and being around the team today?
Yeah, it was a different kind of vibe. I mean, pregame there was this business-like approach where, you know, guys were loose, but it was far more buttoned up on Oregon's front as far as kind of the approach, right? It was like everybody was just kind of locked in a little bit more than what we saw over the first 2 weeks, which isn't to say that they were taking opponents lightly or anything like that, but you saw that the message, those trips to the doctor, they meant a lot more. And when the game started, I mean, it was the speed and physicality of Oregon really stood out. I thought that was pretty apparent on the offensive side of the ball from the get-go, and that continued throughout the course of the game. I mean, it is really hard to go every possession of the game, you put points on the board, and that's what Oregon did from start to finish. It was a complete offensive game, and we were all saying, like, hey, you know, as long as they don't shoot themselves in the foot, they're going to be okay. But they kept shooting themselves in the foot, and today they didn't. And you saw how explosive and efficient this offense can be.
Dusty, obviously the offensive line had a much improved game, not just from a penalty standpoint, but from a rushing and a pass pro standpoint. What were you noticing from them pregame or even in-game that you noticed as, like, that's why they're doing so much better this week as opposed to the first couple?
Well, you know, it's so weird. Like, you feel like a complete and utter homer when you're like, the offensive line isn't that bad if they don't do X, Y, and Z. But because everything was a correctable mistake, right? It was penalties on chunk plays. It was, hey, you have a rotation where in the second half against Boise State, you rushed for 93 yards. Like, they found a rotation that fit, which they didn't rotate in this game. I think that kind of really stood out to me, is that left to right, it was Connerly, Strother, Poncho, Harper, and Cornelius from start until the backups came in. And that group is wildly efficient. I mean, 6 quarters of football, they've rushed for 350 yards. I mean, that is getting work done up front. But I also saw, you know, we saw a few more twists. And I heard you, Will, talking about having Dylan Gabriel as a +1 in the run game. Obviously, his ability to run the football was pronounced in this game. I talked to him about the option play that went for a touchdown. And, you know, I saw on the sidelines Will Stein in that play. They lined up an empty. And Stein, they said they got a look that they liked on film. And so Stein checked them out of empty and brought Whittington back into the backfield, and they ran that option play based on the look that Oregon State was giving them. We saw a lot more check with me. We saw communication between Poncho and Gabriel, which that's a two-way street. That's just not, you know, Charlie Pickard being the center and, you know, things not going well because he's at the center. It's a two-way street with your quarterback and your center communicating and making sure everybody's on the same page. We saw that. And then schematically, we also saw something that is a little bit new at times, where we saw some false pulls on the offensive line, catching eyes going one way and coming back the other way, to where it wasn't just hat on a hat, we're going to get to the next level and we're going to get our explosives by bullying you down the field. There was some deception to it, too, in the run game. The Trayshawn Holden end around, where you have an insert from your tight end, like he's lead blocking up through the A gap. Well, then here comes Trayshawn Holden coming back around, and you have a puller to lead the way for him. There was a lot more layers to the run game this week than what we saw through the first 2 weeks as well.
Dusty, I think that in one of these seasons where these guys go through so many battles together, vibes is such an important thing. And maybe it's like a young person's thing to say, but it felt like over the last week, the vibes were really kind of tight and nervy and shaky around this team. And you even mentioned it being very businesslike before the game. Afterwards, what was the sentiment around the locker room? Was it one of relief, one of jubilation? I mean, at the same time, as much as people wanted to just get stuff right today, you did just beat your in-state rival in a rivalry game and you thumped them. So what are the vibes like after this win?
Yeah, I mean, when you have a performance like that, especially the way that it went down, where, you know, the game, you score and your offense just continues to get points on the board. Offensively, there was a big sigh of relief, but also it was like the switch flipped, where we're excited that this happened. We're excited that, you know, the Ducks own the state for another year. But it was also, we still have things that we can clean up, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, they didn't feel like the first half was up to their standard at all. When you allow 6 for 9 on third down in that first half and over 100 yards rushing, the second half they came out and Oregon State was 1 for 6 on third down and only rushed for 15 yards in the entire second half. That was kind of, they got right, but still aren't satisfied with the fact that the beginning of that game did not go and was not as clean as they hoped. So it was interesting to see, like, they were excited about the performance, but it was also still, our standard is to keep growing off of everything we do. So it was a business-like approach after the game for sure.
What's the big change that you expect to see from Oregon when they take on UCLA in 2 weeks that they're going to work on throughout this bye week?
Boy, that's a great question. I mean, because what the things that we were thinking they needed to clean up, right? Penalties. Mm-hmm. They cleaned up the penalties. Three penalties for 36 yards, and one of those was questionable at best. Not roughing the passer.
Bad.
That was bad. Been one of the worst penalties I've seen in quite some time. That's one of your penalties and half of your penalty yards.
Yep.
Right there, right? And I don't understand how you wipe the targeting off the board, but you don't wipe the penalty off the board, because McCoy was in his throwing motion when he got hit. And I don't know where the correlation is there, but that's it. So penalties, not a factor. Turnovers, another thing, not a factor in this game. No turnovers. Ball hit the turf once. They were able to jump on it, and it was a no countsies there. I think what you're going to see is on the defensive side of the ball, it is cleaning up kind of the assignment football, because we talked with Tatum Tuioti after the game, and he said, we did a good job of caging Giovanni McCoy. And I go back to the first drive, right, where they've got Oregon State 3rd down and 15. McCoy drops back, and the defensive ends and the edge rushers, they do a good job of caging him in, building a wall around him so he can't escape outside. And when you had a linebacker spying McCoy, it's, all right, the defensive line's job is to create an alleyway that funnels right to that linebacker. And they did a great job of that, but you have that missed tackle, right? And that keeps one drive alive. I think that is where you're going to start seeing kind of the button things up, and you can't play as much with reckless abandon and just like your hair on fire. It's more of assignment football on the defensive side of the ball. There were times where Oregon State was getting big runs because, you had Derek Harmon or, Jamari Caldwell that were jumping the snap, and they were in the backfield too far, and Hankerson and Jam Griffin are so slippery. They just made one little slip, and it was a massive hole because they almost got too much depth at times. So I think the assignment on the defensive side of the ball, not jumping gaps, I think that's going to be probably the biggest thing that you're going to see. Offensively, I don't know. I don't know what it is that they work on from now until UCLA, because I think maybe you want to get more comfortable with a deeper rotation on the offensive line. But health will be the big determining factor with that, with how comfortable they feel with Bedford coming back, and eventually if Dave Iuli does get back in that offensive line rotation.
Dusty, when you hit the airwaves with Danny on Monday at noon, what are going to be the headlines from this game that you're going to be digging into?
Efficiency of Oregon's offense is number one. I mean, it's not just the yards per play or the fact they had 22 points on 20 plays in the first half. It was Dylan Gabriel completes his first 15 passes of the game.
15.
And the 16, number 16 was a ball that I mean, Tez Johnson probably catches more times than he doesn't. And that is his efficiency in the way that he's playing, that he looks like he has, feels like something clicked with him and Will Stein as far as the looks that they want to get and how they get to those spots. That is going to be a big one. And then obviously the secondary has played absolutely incredible through the first 3 games of the season. And those guys deserve a little bit more credit. We're not really talking about how good this secondary has been for Oregon. They have been lights out. And you saw what Oregon State was left with in their passing game, and it was sit routes. that's basically all they had was the safety valve throws, and that is a credit to the guys on the back end of the defense. And then when you talk Oregon's offense as well, Research Stadium was really quiet today, and it's not because that was not a charged up, revved up crowd. Oregon did not have a third down until the 9-minute mark of the second quarter. Every stadium in the country gets loud on third down. The crowd was taken out of the game because there were no third downs until 21 minutes of game time had elapsed. That is the way you take a home crowd out of a game, and I thought Oregon did an incredible job of that.
Great points on the secondary. I totally agree with as many new pieces as they've had transfer in, and especially some ones that maybe weren't as talked about, like the Brandon Johnsons of the world. But it's been really nice to see that unit come together, and yeah, absolutely, it's the kind of performance that I think that they're going to be able to build on and take that offense to the next level after the bye week. So, Dusty, we'll catch you from noon to 3. Danny and Dusty right here on 1080 The Fan, Monday through Friday. Have a safe drive back from Corvallis, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and listen to the Program podcast. It's the Ducks podcast, myself and Cole Linehan.
That's right.
Former Ducks defensive lineman. We talk Oregon football every week. It'll release Monday morning at 6 a.m., and we talk to players present, past, coaches, so listen to the program wherever you get your podcast at.
Perfect. Love it. Drive safe, Dusty. We appreciate it.
Thanks, fellas. Have a good one.
That is Dusty Hera down on the sidelines for the Civil War today, and some good insights there. It doesn't surprise me to find out that this team seemed like they were all about business going into this game today, and it certainly showed when they whistle blew and the ball kicked off, because they executed so well, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And that actually brings me once again to our Ducks Game Day secret score.
Ducks Game Day secret score.
That's because the Ducks Game Day secret score was 546. That's 546 as in the number of total yards for the Ducks today. Remember that secret score. Listen to the 7 a.m. Monday morning hour of Dirt and Sprague. Listen for that cue to text in. And if you win, you could get the $100 gift card to Laurelhurst Market, more than just your friendly neighborhood steakhouse. Make your reservation today at laurelhurstmarket.com. Just a couple segments left. We have to get into what's been going around the national scene today. Some big upsets, including a rivalry game right here in the Northwest. That's coming up next. But first, it's time for Schultze with traffic and weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victorico's Mexican Food. Order Victorico's for your game day celebration, in-store or online. Pickup or delivery at victoricos.com.
Thank you, Buck. Looking pretty light now out of Corvallis, except for a few cars still stuck on Highway 34 getting out to I-5 or directly out of Corvallis. 99W looking fairly clear going north. You do still have some slowing I-5 northbound just past the north end of Albany, and then again as you're getting up past Jefferson towards the Salem area. 69 degrees, 68 in Portland at this point with a lot of rain. The Ducks postgame forecast calling for a low of 57 tomorrow, cloudy with a high of 69.
Did you know that most people wait 6 or 7 years before they buy a new TV?
Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show. The Ducks winners 49-14. The number 9 team in the land marches into Reser Stadium and takes care of business against their in-state rival. But now it's time for us to go around the world of college football. And before we get to one of the big ones that I know a lot of people in this area were focusing on, your mind was blown in the break, Will, at one game that's going on right now. Can you explain to us what's happening and why your mind was blown like that?
Yeah, so right now, if you're watching the Tennessee-Kent State game, get better hobbies. Do something else with your life. Don't be like me. But there is 5 minutes left to go. Sorry, almost 6 minutes left to go in the second quarter. Right now, Tennessee is up 51-0 on Kent State. They put up 37 points in the first. 37.
And, I never thought the Golden Flashes had the greatest of programs, but I thought they were a frisky MAC team. I guess not.
I thought maybe you'd score 51 at the end of the fourth.
Sure, yeah, or even the end of the third.
At this rate, you might hit like 120.
You know what we're going to get? We're going to get another one of those games like South Alabama had on Friday where they just decide that the fourth quarter is only going to be like 6 minutes and it's not going to pay out any of the bets. Did you see about that happening?
No.
So there have been a couple games now that have gone. They've been such blowouts.
Oh, I did see
that
this.
they will cut the games short. In the Georgia game last week, I think they agreed to play 2 10-minute quarters in the second half because it was so lopsided at halftime. And then South Alabama in their last game, I don't remember who they were playing. It was like 87-10 was the final, but they agreed at the end of the third quarter with the coaches and the refs they were just going to play 6 minutes. So the game only went 54 minutes, and you need to play 55 minutes to cash a bet.
That should be illegal.
Yeah.
That is malfeasance.
You should not be allowed to change the length of a quarter either.
I wouldn't think so.
That is, we are not in middle school or high school. The mercy rule things need to stop. We are paying players now in college sports.
Yeah.
Stop this. Oh my God.
I realize both teams are probably in a position where they don't want to see guys get hurt, but
too bad.
Everyone else in the country is playing all 60 minutes. Yeah, well, let's get back to the matters at hand today, and right to Seattle, Lumen Field for what was supposed to be a home game for the Cougs, even though it's in the Huskies' backyard, essentially a home game for them, and it was the freaking Cougs pulling it off, 24-19, they beat the Huskies.
It was beautiful. I thought when Mateer threw that interception, I was like, perfect time to Coug it, here it comes, and then they didn't. I want to know what Jed Fish was thinking when he made that play call on 4th and goal. You don't have a running quarterback and you run a speed option when you have Coleman, one of the most elusive running backs. Oh, by the way, he's 220. He's a behemoth and it's on the 1 yard line. Just run dive. Like, what are you doing? Really bad play call, but at the same time, I'm so happy for Washington State.
That's a massive, massive win for them.
Like, everyone leaves you for dead, and you find a way to win a game in a quote-unquote home game, neutral site game, but really it's set up so Washington gets a third home game in your 5-game schedule of making sure that this game gets played for the next 5 years.
Yep.
And I love the comments that Dickert had after the game. He said it's a Pac-12 trophy and that they're going to retire this trophy and WSU was going to hold on to the Apple Cup trophy and they'd get a new one for next year.
Wow.
That's awesome.
You know what? Lean into it, man. Yeah, the Beavs and the Cougs have had such a rough go in the last 12 months that, enjoy your flowers when they show up. That's great. A couple other national storylines I want to get to real quick before we wrap things up. Texas is just absolutely handling UTSA, which is to be expected. The news, though, is that Quinn Ewers left that game with an abdominal strain. Now, who knows about the severity of that, but Arch Manning is in the game now. Texas, though, number 2 in the country, and if Quinn Ewers isn't their guy moving forward or even for a couple weeks, it will be interesting to see what happens with that squad. Additionally, you got a little bit of a barn burner in Lexington as number 1 Georgia not exactly looking the part as they're getting close to halftime here. It's 3-3 between number 1 Georgia and an unranked Kentucky, and then UCLA is in a rough way right now after narrowly escaping Hawaii in the Rose Bowl. They're now trailing 21-7 to Kurt Signetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. That is a home game. Coach Prime in Colorado, they're up 14-3 at the half on rival Colorado State.
That was a 60 over-under, by the way. That was a way too high of a score.
Oh, boy. Will, anything else standing out to you in the national landscape today of being significant or that's tickling your fancy?
For no reason at all, the New Mexico Auburn game is 17-13 down in Alabama, and it's at half right now. So the pace is good, like where everyone's scoring, like how it looks over it right now.
Really quickly too, that Tennessee score of 51-0 in the first half alone. The last time there was a 100-point win in college football was 2003 when Rockford beat Trinity Bible College 105-0. So it could happen. It could happen today.
I've actually seen that college.
Go Rockford.
I've seen Trinity.
The legends of Rockford. All right, we will wrap things up. Talk about what the bye week will hold for the Oregon Ducks coming up next, and also pass out some game balls. Who deserves one from Corvallis today? You're listening to the Pacific Office Automation postgame scoreboard show on 1080 The Fan. But now it's time for Schulte with the Ducks game day traffic and weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victorricos.com.
Appreciate it, Buck. We're still seeing slowing I-5 northbound. Actually, it's all clear once you get up to Albany, but on your way up to Albany, I should say. Past there, it is still slow. I-5 north up, basically through Salem, adding at least another 20-25 minutes to your commute. But out of Corvallis and the immediate areas surrounding there, looking pretty clear at this point. Right now, 68 degrees in Portland with a lot of rain. The Ducks postgame forecast calling for a low of 57. Tomorrow, cloudy with a high of 69.
This is the story of the one. As a warehouse manager, her job
Snap. Quick throw over. A little screen to Lamar. Lamar's going to get the first down, and he might go all the way. 30. He's at the 20. He's got enough speed to go to the house. Jaden Lamar. Screen pass. Touchdown, Oregon.
This is the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show on the Odyssey app and your home for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Wrapping up the Pacific Office Automation postgame scoreboard show, Ryan Buckley, Will Ortner, Jordan Schultz, and fellas, before we get into some game balls, Will, real quick, I'm never a fan, just as a fan of the game, I'm never a fan of bye weeks. They're boring because my team doesn't get to play.
Right.
But what can this team get out of their bye week? What'll be happening for the Ducks this week while we don't get to watch them play football on next Saturday?
They can continue to clean up a lot of the mistakes that they've had in the past. Just because you fixed it for this one game against Oregon State doesn't mean that offensive line is completely together. It looked so much better than it did before. But I need to see it week after week after week. So continuing to hone that in. Continuing to hone in Gabriel's knowledge of the offense. And this is going to give Coach Stein opportunities to dial up more intricate plays, more exotic plays that are going to allow for more explosive opportunities. And then defensively, just continue to get healthy with Bossa and get everyone back on the same page so that that D-line is getting after the passer.
Well, we got Will's very best player of the game was Dylan Gabriel. Jordan, who you giving a game ball to this week?
I'm going a sneaky one, Nishad Strother.
Okay.
Coming in, shoring up the offensive line, starting at left guard, allowing Poncho to get back to center, and making the Ducks line look like we expected it to.
Despite some low-hanging fruit production elements, I'm going to take Bryce Betcher. He was all over the field today. I just love the way that he was sideline to sideline leading the team in tackles. I love what he's bringing to the university, and both on the diamond and on the gridiron, and excited to see what he has the rest of the year. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. I want to thank Dusty Hera, Andy Dirt Johnson, and Anthony Newman for joining us on the phone. Thanks to my co-host, Will Ortner. Thanks to Jordan doing the heavy lifting behind the glass. The Ducks, winners, 49-14. It's a bye week next week before Big Ten play starts.
This has been the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show, brought to you by Coors Light.